afternoon, everyone. So thanks for having me here. Thanks for inviting EIF. Uh, Ms. Pilar de Castillo, who just left, and Ms. Margot. And I'm the founder of Startup Europe India Network. We're talking about collaboration here. So Startup Europe India Network is about collaboration between Europe and India. And we also have, we essentially work, we are a grassroots movement. We work with startups and scale-ups from both sides of the market and also investors from both sides of the market. We also work with a number of whom we call as ambassadors in different ecosystems. So we also have our Brussels ambassador here, Fabrizio, whom most of you know. So it's great to be here. The topic is about collaboration and what's happening on the digital agenda and the policy in India. That's going to be my focus. You may all have this one pager in front of you. There's got to be a lot of acronyms and short forms, so it helps, I think, to have it in front of you. So first of all, maybe a quick question. I know I'm fighting with attention with food and myself. So who has been to India? It's one, two people have been there to India. So amazing. So we will have a lot to talk. Three. Yeah. So we have a lot to talk about. First, I think if you think about India, it's one of the biggest topics in India is scale. So we are talking about a massive country. It's 1.25 billion people and growing, and it's soon going to become the most populous country on Earth and probably in history of Earth, right? So this is a massive topic that is on everybody's minds when they're acting on any policy, let alone digital policy. India has 29 states, 7 union territories, basically the states that are directly ruled by the central government through an appointee, and it has 22 official languages and more than 200 unofficial languages. And so I think one thing comes to my mind immediately, it's European Union. So it's very similar to European Union in terms of the diversity. And when I say languages, it's really different. It's like French, German. You really are talking about different languages. My mother tongue is different than what's spoken in Delhi, for example, where I was born and raised in India. So the two main topics, I think if you think about India, if you want to think about India, I think you have to think about what's the driving factor that is enacting those policies. May it be a general policy, may it be digital policy. 2 points that I would highlight, which you have in your top left, it is population and job creation. So as I said, India has 1.25 billion population, but it also has the youngest population on Earth. And very soon, between the age of 15 to 64, in a span of less than a decade, there are going to be more than 1 billion people. So these people are going to fight for jobs. These people are going to fight for every resource that's out there. So the population is something that is on top of everybody's mind. Second, environment and climate change, which goes along with the population as well, because you have strains on all these topics. What about the environmental impact, the pollution, and also the climate change? India is going to have some of the parts of India are going to be worst affected by climate change. So for me, these two critical elements drive every policy in India. Imagine it right now in India, almost 1 million people are entering the job market every month. Every single month, 1 million people. And for the whole of 2016, India created less than 500,000 jobs for the entire year. But you have 1 million people entering the job market. It's a massive challenge, right? So to go to what is driving into India's digital agenda, it's a need for speedy solutions is driving the Indian digital agenda, in my opinion. So what has happened since India has relatively been a slow starter, but it's trying to catch up. So India has been an outsourcing destination since late 90s and early 2000s, and which actually graduated a lot of people in the IT sector, which has done very well to India. And starting from late 2000s, the technology wave really started taking off. And since 2015 or 14, when the new government came into picture, they started embracing digital like no one else has ever done in India. So this has enacted a number of programs. You have these green concentric circles. You don't have to go through all of that. That just show the scale of programs that the Indian government has taken. This roughly comes to 20 initiatives. That was from last year. But by now it has more than doubled to more than 40 initiatives. So what is happening is the eventual driver of this is to make India a cashless and also to a certain extent paperless society. And that's driving everything. And one of the key projects underlying of all of this really kick-started by the previous government in 2009, which is called, if you look at the India stack, the one on the top of it, called Aadhaar UID. Aadhaar in Hindi means foundation, and UID is essentially what it is world's biggest project of creating biometric information of every single Indian resident and citizen, and with all your 10 fingerprints, with your iris scan, and with your identification. And this is a massive initiative. More than 1.1 billion people have already been covered in this initiative since 2009. The new government is using this initiative as the pillar of everything else that's being built on top of it. And why is this just creating an identification and authentication important? I think it really then comes down to the understanding what India is. India, as I said, like it's 29 states, 22 languages, number of different dialects, different literacy, and et cetera, et cetera. But if someone from South India wants to get actually prove this person is who he claims to be, you do not have probably a documentation to prove that in North India. So most of the people are, like, a lot of kids are born at homes and not in hospitals and not recorded immediately. You do not have the proof to show who you are. And this is a massive problem, and I would even claim in some cases a life-threatening problem. Because if you're in the hospital, if you cannot get your pension anywhere else, sometimes the pension are 50 euros, and you have to spend 10 euros to 15 euros to go and actually collect the pension, wait for 5 days to 10 days to collect the pension. But now, if you spend 15 to 20 euros out of your 50 euros pension per month, you can imagine how difficult it is for people. So this UID is solving massive number of problems. And this is an amazing initiative from India. And as you can see down there, the World Bank Development Report essentially says that digital identification systems such as India's Aadhaar, by overcoming complex information problems, helps willing governments promote the inclusion of disadvantaged groups. So this is inspiring, especially to a lot of developing countries. And to give you how it inspires business and how it transforms India is one example of a mobile operator called Jio. That's just been launched more than a year ago by India's richest man, by Reliance Industries and Mukesh Ambani. They signed up in less than 7 months more than 100 million users or subscribers to the mobile phones. So that roughly translates to 450,000 users per day that you need to sign up. And typically, if you have to prove yourself before to actually sign up for this, it takes 2 to 3 days, right? How can you sign up 450,000 users? Thanks to Aadhaar. They can validate you within seconds, and boom, you go, you got your subscriber base. And they basically demolished actually what's known as the telecom market at the time, and they reduced the price by more than half. And now in my home, back home in India, basically they disconnected the fixed line. They have 10 Jio mobile phones giving internet everywhere as hotspots, and they're using it for everything. And it's very cheap. For one subscriber, it's less than 3 euros. So it's amazing amount of work that's been done through UID. And India is now building what is called as the India stack based on the UID. Now we have most of the Indian citizens covered. They're covering digital locker, so they are going through as a paperless society. Now you can have a driving license digitally. You don't have to have a paper copy. Now you can open a bank account using UID within seconds, which used to take days and weeks and more. This is a massive change. Now you just give a fingerprint, it's changing. And UPI is the United Payments Interface, again built on the UID. This essentially lets two users authenticate. I can send to Fabrizio money without going through a bank account. So you just need authentication. I need to know that's Fabrizio. You can have something like an email address, and you can send him payments. And this is a boon to India because you have to think that there are more than 400 million people in India that do not have bank accounts. And in this context, you're having something like a UPI interface is a boon to India to get it to people whom you can receive money without a bank account. And they also build on this to create new bank accounts with the UID. They have signed up more than 250 million bank accounts based on the UID. And now they're going into e-sign, so essentially e-signature. And e-signature is, of course, as you all know what signature means, but I work for different institutions. Getting an e-signature within an institution is difficult. Now think about a 1.2 billion people e-signature. That's a massive project. And then e-KYC, so know your customer. So this is an India stack that is basically being allowed and then encouraged by the private sector and the public sector to use it alike. Everybody is bought into it. The government is bought into it. And the India stack is something that is transforming India in many different ways. I think the most important thing here is to understand that the concerted approach of having the identification is being the pillar for every change that India is doing today. So that's the India stack. And then I would like to identify a few pillars that India faces a massive challenge. Some of them are identified with the colleagues from both Japan and also Latin America. One of the biggest challenges that you see those boxes, access, the access challenge. So India does not have access to internet for millions of people. So right now there is about roughly about 800 million users in India in terms of mobile phones, but only 400 million users in terms of who have access to internet. But the interesting thing is, out of both of these users, there is 80% of the users are mobile users. You use internet on mobile and use internet on use basically access internet on mobile. But getting this connectivity to them is now one of the policy initiatives called BharatNet by the Indian government. They're doing it in multiple approaches. You have to take it to near to your home, but they also have what is called the last mile connectivity problem. So they're working with both the public sector by connecting all the local initiatives, but also the private sector. So they want to have about 500,000 of Wi-Fi hotspots, for example. So not just you take the broadband, but you also have a Wi-Fi hotspot. But funnily enough, one of the interesting Wi-Fi hotspot providers in India is Google. And so there are people who go to a railway station because they want to download something really quickly. If you want to download a gigabyte of the movie, they go to railway stations and use the Google Wi-Fi to download it because it's much faster than what you get at home. So it's interesting things happen there. Authentication and security, we talked a lot about that in Aadhaar, eKYC. So this is being really the pillar of transforming the digital society in India, and the number of applications that's being built on it. So the UPI, basically the payment interface I talked about, now the applications that allow you to transfer this money. You have Taze from Google, which has taken off massively. BIM from the government itself. You have Paytm, one of the locally grown massive companies in the fintech space. And then you have, for all this to happen, to encourage the private sector to innovate and keep innovating, financing is the backbone of all of that. India has put together roughly about $1.2 billion fund of funds scheme, similar to the European Investment Fund here in Europe. But that's not enough by any scale for the kind of challenges and innovation that has to happen to India. There's a lot of opportunities for essentially for foreign countries to come and invest in India and be part of this digital transformation. I would have to say that probably Europe is lagging there. European companies and corporates have been in India, some of them like Ericsson have been there for more than 100 years. But when it comes to investments in tech, you have Japan, you have China, you have US. Those are the leading foreign countries that have a massive impact on innovation. Japan with the SoftBank has been one of the biggest investors in India. And then all this have to be supported by legislation. The government is proactively doing this. There is Aadhaar Act, basically anything that has been done via the identification can be challenged in the court. So India is a democracy that shares values also with Europe. So legislation has been enacted to protect what has been done with Aadhaar, with an Aadhaar Act. There is also for small businesses, fast-track insolvency, and so on and so forth. So a lot of these initiatives that have been proactively taken by the government, and the government is clearly in a hurry. The next election is coming next year, so the current government has the majority for the first time in Indian Parliament, maybe in 25 years, as a one single government. That actually allows them to enact things that has not been possible in the past couple of decades. Some of you have highlighted artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, and blockchain. So India's problems, as I talked to you about, is access, is about financing, it's about jobs, but it doesn't mean that the country can stand by when cutting-edge innovation is actually happening. So India has proven well in the space sector, in terms of microsatellites to nanosatellites to rocket launches. They also now enacted the National Strategy for Artificial Intelligence by the agency called Niti Aayog. This is the first shot in terms of artificial intelligence. The biggest problem in AI is availability of data, and this problem is relatively less crucial for US and China because they have data. They are massive companies that have data, but in Europe we don't. The same problem that India has. They do not collect data, but they can produce data with 1 billion people. And blockchain, so the finance minister has just asked for a blockchain initiative to be enacted. So in both these topics, I would say that India is relatively slow, but is looking to speed up. I would conclude by saying that in terms of the opportunities that Europe can take advantage of, I think India is an ideal country. You have a democracy, you have a country with a massive amount of buying power, population, and infrastructure to be built and financing to be done. And Europe can do a lot there with its expertise currently. On my other hat is I'm a venture capitalist. I'm sitting on the board of a number of venture capital funds here in Europe. So many of the VCs have not been to India, and they have not even considered investing in India. So that's an opportunity and greenfield opportunity. Second thing is on collaboration. Collaboration, especially on the low-hanging fruits. MSMEs, so SMEs are going to be the biggest job creators on both sides of the market. And enacting and market access, ease of collaboration among the corporates and the SMEs between these two markets, I think are crucial in actually making things happen more than the policy. So thank you very much.